I'm one happy woman tonight getting the chance to interview someone of this caliber of talent and stature. We're going to start with some questions for Kevin Costner about the film that we've all just watched and obviously appreciated, and then a little bit about the career, and of course, time for a few questions from the audience at the end. I wanted to start off with, a basic question. What was it about Mike Binder's screenplay that led you not only to agree to star in the film, but in fact to produce it, to finance it? You have two companies, Treehouse Films and TIG Productions. What was it about this material that spoke to you?
Well, first off, thank you for coming out on this cold night. I know there's a lot of places you could be, and in the name of cinema, you came here. For those of you who had followed my career and came because of that, thank you. These questions are, as an actor, what you're looking for is the next great story. And for me, it's like trying to predict love when it's going to come into your life. You can't do that. And I'm always jealous of the experience that you had tonight of seeing it on the screen. My experience with movies, the first time, at least my own, are in black and white, on a white page. And so often when I will sit on my bed or in a chair and read the script that's supposed to speak out loud to me, it doesn't. And then sometimes the words start. And in this instance, this movie started with a very vulgar word. A lot of words that could have maybe explained loss. I feel so bad. I feel so alone. I feel so awful. But I read on this page, the loss of your love of your life. I feel so shitty. And I thought to myself, well, this is starting interesting. This is starting pretty authentically. And what happens, and what's happened in my career, I've been on that same chair, on that same couch, and I read about men coming out of a cornfield, and I thought, really? But as I read more and more, something magical, and that script was a miracle. And if we could pull it off, maybe people would still be watching. And in fact, 25 years later, people still are. I sat on that couch and I read Dances with Wolves, and I went west before it was gone. And I read a movie about the small of a woman's back, the hanging curve, high fiber, good scotch, softcore pornography.
We showed that clip.
Opening your presents. Christmas morning rather than Christmas Eve. So I have read things that, while they didn't read like giant movies, read like movies that wouldn't go away if we pulled them off. And when I read Black or White, I have to say I had made a movie called Upside of Anger with Joan Allen, the fabulous Joan Allen. Mike Binder wrote that part, and evidently he enjoyed working with me, and he wrote 4 other screenplays for me, and I said no to all of them. So not only did I stretch my professional relationship with him, but I risked hurting his feelings. And that's what makes people tenacious that make movies. He kept coming back, and he wrote this thing called Black or White, and I read it, and I was just, again, reminded of a movie that suddenly started speaking to me, saying things that I have wished I could have said. I wonder if in the audience, as you heard speeches in the courtroom, if you heard Octavia telling her son what time it was, Anthony Mackie reminding him he's a cliche, endorsing what the white community thinks. Actors see those things and they see a chance to live forever. And so when I read Black or White, I felt that this movie had a chance to live long past that proverbial opening weekend. It reminded me of a movie that I could share. And of course, I thought that the film community would rush to make it, but that didn't happen. And it's not my first experience, because the movies I just outlined had the same exact reception. Well, I don't know if Bull Durham's going to play in Europe. And I know that Field of Dreams won't play there. And those are considerations when it comes to movies. I don't feel that way. I like the supermodel like everybody, but I can fall in love with the waitress. Because sometimes they're the most beautiful, they're the most real. And I fell in love with Black or White. And when no one else wanted to make it, I couldn't fall out of love with it. Because I thought I had a big secret. I thought things black or white changed me a little bit. It's not my first thought that counts. It's my second, my third, and fourth. And so growing up wanting to do speeches like Spencer had and Inherit the Wind, and, you know, to be Peck walking out of that courtroom and have somebody say, stand up, your father's walking by. We can still make movies like that. We can still have the hair on the back of our neck stand up. And when I read these speeches, I thought, I want to make those. I want my Inherit the Wind speech. And so when the movie wouldn't be made, I decided that I had opened my big mouth and promised Mike Binder that we would make it. And when that didn't happen, I felt cornered. I couldn't fall out of love, and I made a promise. So I walked down the hall, and my wife knows that walk. You know, we all have a walk when we're kids. If your dad sounded something like this, if it went like that, and then it went like this, meant he was going to his room to get a belt. That scared me. If he went right into my room, I knew he was just going to explain life to me. We know the walk, and my wife came in, she said, what, before I said anything? I said, I think we're going to have to pay for black or white. And she said, really? Did you hear that in a cornfield? I mean, why us, Kev? And we had this little talk, and she backed me up, but I made it because I believed that it could move people, and I thought that it moved you a little bit tonight. That's why I made it.
That's for sure. But you just now invoked Spencer Tracy in Inherit the Wind, Gregory Peck in To Kill a
Everything.
You know, but here's where I'm going. Those were heroes in a very recognizable sense. And one of the things that I find really touching and plausible about this film is how flawed your character Elliot is. This is not a film that makes you go from the beginning, of course he's the right person to take custody, of course he's the knight in shining armor. No, he's a very flawed person. So that for me makes it a more modern film than some of the ones that you've invoked. And I'm even going to ask you about a scene in the courtroom that struck me as one that could have gone easier on Elliot and didn't. Elliot is accused by Jeremiah of...
He's a what?
He's accused by Jeremiah of calling Reggie a street nigger. Now, we saw the scene. That's not what Elliot said. He said, quit acting like a street nigger, 'cause you're not. And I was fascinated both times that I've seen the film that you don't go, that's not what I said. In other words, there's not the immediate self-justification that would make us go, yeah, Elliot, you kind of let that go. And it was an interesting decision for me on the level of script, acting, and direction that it wasn't saying, no, I didn't say that. Could you tell us a little about that?
A lot of times when we deal with the idea of race, you know, we're a little more comfortable with looking back at history. We can watch The Butler a little bit. We can watch Selma. We can watch 12 Years a Slave. But it's hard for us to take an authentic look at where we're at in this country today with race. And I thought that's exactly what happened. And like any great story, you wait for it to unfold. You know, the hero that we're talking about is Tracy and those guys, man, those guys. The hero in American cinema never blames and he never explains, right? And the idea that you picked up on that, I think, is really good. I didn't feel the need to do that. I think, you know, I've been able to make movies about baseball. I've been able to make the Western, the romantic comedy, the political thriller, and sometimes you get to make a movie about the moment you're swimming in. And we are swimming in this moment of race, and our problems did not start in August. They have been with us for so long. And I thought that this screenplay was incredibly even. Reggie is not the only person having trouble. I'm having trouble. I tell him to get his act together, then I go 10 feet and go glug, glug, glug. I think Mike Binder was a very even-handed movie, and the things that you're picking up on, there's little details in this movie, and they start with combing a little girl's hair.
Right.
And they start with a grandfather who's not equipped, maybe doesn't even know exactly how to get to the school. All those moments add up to the big moments, but they're just as important, and I've always believed that in cinema. And, you know, it's only one story. We don't set the record straight, we don't reinvent history, but if I'm gonna make a movie about race, I know that you will smell a rat if we don't go right at it. And the idea of explaining didn't make a lot of sense. Just let it lay there. We ended up finding out in the courtroom that's a word that Reggie used, because we know that in this instance. And so every time you think maybe Elliot's right, just wait 5 minutes and Wee-Wee's right. You know, but part of the charm of the movie for me was when Elliot went down to that household in Compton. And I think in another movie, there would be suspicion as he walked down there. There would be, people got quiet in that house. There would be no more laughter that was in that house in Compton. It was just the opposite. Those people came out and they said they were sorry for his loss. They hugged him. They embraced him. And he reminded them maybe they watched too much TV.
I appreciate the way that you're phrasing this. So much of the magic of this film for me comes from Eloise.
Yeah.
In other words, the casting of a very young, presumably non-professional Julian Estelle. Could you just talk a little bit about working with her? Was what seemed like such a natural, symbiotic relationship, was that a function of a lot of rehearsal? Was it just spontaneous? Did you do a lot of takes? I mean, she
was a very spontaneous little girl. Look, you know, whenever you have the responsibility of a movie on a 9-year-old, that's a lot. And I knew that for the movie to work, she would have to work. And I think I've told people this story, you may have heard it, but it started with 1,000 girls, it went to 100, it went to 50, and it ended up to 3. And of course, when it gets down to 3, 2 things are gonna happen absolutely for sure. And the first is 2 hearts are gonna break, along with their parents. They're gonna walk out of that room like every actor does, and they don't get the part. And one girl's life is gonna maybe change a little bit. We didn't know for sure if we had chosen right. We'd chosen carefully, but we didn't know if we chose right. And the one scene in bed, just a highlight for her. And I love how quiet you are. I love how you love film. This is as exciting for me to talk to you. Maybe it's not exciting for you. I shouldn't make that leap.
Yeah.
But this is good for me to be able to talk because I made it for you. I paid for it so you'd see it. I'm going to ask that you go tomorrow and pay yourself. But you know, it was important that she actually worked. And in that scene where I was reading to her, and I'm reading the story, the sad story, which she says it's not so sad. It's about a mermaid that goes on vacation, Papa. But of course, I'm thinking about my wife. During the reading of it, she reached up and grabbed me by the neck 3 times. And the fourth time, she kissed me. And it was an electric moment for an actor. She wasn't scripted to do that. No one told her to do that. And she handed me my performance as I was thinking about my wife while reading a silly little story. And I'll forever be grateful for her, but that's an electric moment, and she just did that. I don't know what possessed her, but she did it, and it's frozen forever in film.
I'm going to take a wild guess here, though, and suggest that part of the reason she did that was that you were such a good, nurturing partner to her. In other words, it wasn't just that Costner and Julian Estelle, it was you had become this papa figure that she trusted and presumably felt able to try things with you that she might not have tried with a different kind of actor. I don't know.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah. And
thank you. No, listen, I had so much money on riding on this little girl. I was like, come on, baby, come on. You know, she was good.
Now, I could not help but notice those rather weighty words at the beginning, inspired by true events.
Yes.
Not based on a true story, which is the usual, but inspired by true events. Could you tell us a little bit about the factual?
Yes. Is Mike Binder in the room? He's not. He's a very quiet guy. He's the writer-director. I will just tell you, Mike Binder, wife, sister, she died of a bad blood transfusion. She died of AIDS back when we were really hurting, and we're still hurting. But she died, and she had a biracial baby, and the child's father was not going to be in her life from South Central, and so Mike and his wife began raising this little boy, and the grandparents in South Central were also raising. There was no acrimony there. There was a lot of love back and forth. They really shared raising this boy. Little boy's now about 34 years old, and it is just just a very well adjusted. It was loved by both families. So probably the truest character in it is Reggie, not being a part of the child's life in this instance, but Mike thought it was a really great window, and writers do that. I was able to make a movie called 13 Days about John Kennedy and Bobby when they were, when they were at their best. When we needed them to be their best, they were their best during those days. But we didn't tell that story through their eyes. We told it through Kenny O'Donnell. And it made it more authentic, because it'd be otherwise Jack talking about how good he was during those days, or Bobby talking about how good he was during those days. But when we talk about the friend, Kenny O'Donnell, talking about how great they were, that's the window that a writer lets us all in. And I think Mike used this story and created drama where there was no drama. Because Mike thought to himself, what if his wife died? How would he deal with this young child? And certainly the issue of where that child should be would have become an issue. And Mike did that, and through that, he pulled no punches. He played this movie close to the bone. And I, for one, feel a little bit better, have a bigger handle on race a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Especially because you've worked with him twice now, I wonder if you could compare working with Mike Binder to some of the amazing filmmakers with whom you have collaborated, Clint Eastwood on A Perfect World. I jotted down a few of my favorites. We showed a clip from De Palma, The Untouchables, Lawrence Kasdan, a few films, Ron Shelton, Kevin Reynolds, Rob Reiner. Mike Binder is a screenwriter and director and an actor. Could you talk a little about what that process was like in comparison to some of the others?
Well, Mike's really tortured, like all writers. I like the writer-director. I like first-time directors, and I have been able to work with the guys that have stood the test of time with what they've done. So Mike was a joy. He trusted me, hey, I made his movie. He loves me, man. But he's a true artist, and to know Mike, he's a stand-up comedian. So the arc that Mike has made in our business, to not just go ahead and make comedies, which you feel like would be his strike zone. Mike has gone on to make these intelligent dramas that I think we all really appreciate. I really do. I think he has a voice that we all could get behind, and I think Black or White was a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And casting Bill Burr as your closest associate, I've been watching Bill Burr for the past couple of weeks. Was it on Jon Stewart, on The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore? Bill Maher he was on. He's a stand-up comedian, too, who happens to also be a very good actor, and I'm curious about...
It was tremendous. Bill Burr was really great, and Octavia Spencer and Anthony Mackie. We had some really wonderful actors who really hit their marks, understood that they were talking maybe not only for themselves, but, again, for their generation.
Right. I have a silly question that just dawned on me, though. Because you are a director too, I mean, you're not just somebody who comes in and plays the part and maybe even produces and finances. You've made, Dances with Wolves, which for me is one of the truly great directed films of the past 30 years. Do you sometimes feel an impulse, whether you control it or not, to whisper to the director, maybe it should be cut this way? In other words, to actually allow a directorial side of you to emerge, or do you just quash it if that's not
I don't have a really problem with that at all. A director has to make sense to me. I think actors that you have seen who've traveled through time usually are director-proof, which means somebody starts saying something really silly, you know, and go, I'm an artist, yeah, but it's still really silly. And you have to have that level of instinct. But I'm really happy that the director comes every day. There's so much work that comes with directing, and I've always directed by default. I always think that somebody's better at it than me. So I was really happy that Mike was directing this. And no, I don't feel that need. I think if anything, I keep a director from second guessing himself, because they're out there all the time. Maybe we shouldn't say the N word. Maybe we can, no, we're going to say that. So I like to feel like I'm a player I'm a player coach. I feel like some of these coaches have had Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. I'm not saying I'm those guys, but when I'm out on the court, I'm not going to let my coach lose.
Yeah, okay. And I know that some people in the audience have seen and loved Upside of Anger the way I have, but some do not know this film. I'm just going to mention that Joan Allen stars as an embittered mother of 4, and I love your performance as this former baseball star, now a bit paunchy and often stoned or drunk and sometimes downright silly, and very appealing. Is it...
Finally, geez, you got to get to the end of the list for that one.
Well, just to set the context right.
All right, my daughters think I'm handsome.
We think you're still pretty handsome, by the way, but let me get to the question.
Yeah.
How hard or easy is it for an actor like you to let go of the matinee idol image that you had, let's say, in Bull Durham? And I ask this because of The Company Men, another film, remarkably good performance with you as the blue-collar, a little bit paunchy brother-in-law of the Ben Affleck character. You know, to play the aging guy like that, is that easy or just part of the...
Well, in Black or White, you know, when you lose your partner in life, everything changes. You don't know how to dress anymore. You don't know how to make your hair right the way she would make it right. She wouldn't let me go to work unless it was right. And it all starts to fall apart. You know, my children don't always know, you know, my youngest one, you know, they have a way of taking you down a notch, you know, and for instance, I don't let them see some of my movies because they're ours and they're PG-13s or whatever. But my 3-year-old somehow came in when I was watching, still working on Black or White, and it was a pool scene where I get drug out, you know, onto the side. And I didn't realize that she had come in, so she wasn't seeing this drama play out of me maybe drowning, you know, or drowning, because I had an incident on when my little boy watched me die in Perfect World, and when it was all over, he was laying on my stomach. His sister had come into me, and the oldest one said, I want to see that movie. I said, what? I want to see Perfect World. She goes, I want to see it. And I looked at her and I said, okay, well, there's some parts where you're going to have to go like this. And she said, I'll do that. And I said, okay, you can. And then the other 2 emerged right behind her that were, you know, 8 and 6. So we watched Perfect World. At the end, I die in it. And my son by that time had been laying on my chest. And when the movie was over, he spun and he started to touch my face. And he couldn't reconcile what he just saw. So I knew, I understand this thing. And so Gracie, my 4-year-old, came in when I was drug out of the pool, but I didn't know she had come in next to me. And so I'm watching that, and I'm trying to think about something, and then all of a sudden I feel her, and I see her, and I said, hey, Gracie. And she goes, you got a big tummy. I said, what? So you got a big tummy. You got a big tummy on the pool. I said, that's character development. I'm a grandpa. What's a grandpa? Well, I'm not your grandpa. What's a grandpa? There's going to be a lot in this conversation, right? And I said, it's just a character thing. Go see your mom. I can smell cinnamon rolls and bacon. So, you know, all that little actor stuff, there's a big belly. You got a big belly right there. So you do have to give it up. And it's okay to do that. For my girls, I'm the strongest guy in the world. Until that guy comes down the driveway and you're not anymore. That's okay. I have had my day. I have a life that I never thought I would have. And And as far as I'm concerned, as long as I can do it for my little guys, I'm still going to be the strongest guy in the world.
All right. And speaking of your children, I may be wrong. Is one of your daughters in the
Yes.
film singing in
Yeah,
the funeral?
the little girl that sings the song and at the memorial, that's my daughter Lily.
All right. Wow. Obviously,
She's a
the
true
talent.
beauty.
The talent extends.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier being like a coach, a team player, and I do want to talk about. I mean, so much of your work is marked by the physical grace of an athlete. And I think you've made more baseball-themed movies than almost any actor I can think of. And I was doing some research. I read that at 18, you built your own canoe and paddled down the rivers that Lewis and Clark followed to the Pacific. That's true?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're a skilled equestrian. You did your own riding in a film like The Postman that you directed in '97. How much of your acting has been anchored in the sort of athletic externalizing, you know?
Well, who doesn't want to win the girl? Who doesn't want to kick sand in the bully's face? Who doesn't want to, get the bad guys? Who wouldn't want to be on the horse riding with 3,000 buffaloes, something that hadn't been done? So if you think you can do it, who wouldn't want to do it? The reason I get on the horse is I think a lot of you would want to be on the horse. And if it's not me on the horse, the camera's going to be way far back. But if I can do it, you can be right there with me. Who wouldn't want to pitch a perfect game in Yankee Stadium? I did. Who wouldn't want to be in the bathtub with Sarandon? I did. I've had it very good, and if you want to give that off to your stuntman, do it. Not me. There are so many ways to act with your body without ever saying anything. We are given so many tools as actors, and it's up to us to use them. But one of the things I have been able to do was be physical with things. And I have lived a life of adventure. Thank God I found acting. Thank God I found storytelling. And a lot of it comes from these adventures I took on my own. I used to work on commercial fishing boats. So, there was no guarantees for me. But the minute I realized what it was I wanted to do, I took a death grip on it.
Wow. Is it true that when you graduated high school, you were kind of my height, like 5'2", and then it was only in college that you grew into a
It was when I
star?
was 16. Look, I know this is a boring story, but everybody knows when you get your driver's license, everybody wants to see your picture, right? The girls want to see it. And so I was so happy I had my driver's license. I was 16 years old, so not when I graduated, but I was a sophomore. I was 16 years old. I was 5'2" because all the girls saw it right on the car. They go, "You're 5'2". That was all right the first time one said it, but after about the 5th time, I took my license back, and I realized that was very short. And I'm not sure I ever quite got over it, but I did. I was a late bloomer. I have been a late bloomer physically. I've been a late bloomer almost in every phase of my life. I didn't get my SAG card till I was 27 years old. When people thought that I directed really quickly after about 5 or 6 movies, they didn't realize that I had been wanting to direct for a long time and had kept my eyes open. So, everything comes to me slow, and almost in every phase. I feel like I could take oil out of the water. I spent $20 million doing that. I do it better than anybody in the world. It took me 25 years to get anybody to use it, and they still won't use it. But you know what? I don't go away because I believe in what I do, and I believe in an idea like that's what we have to do. We don't sink the oil down. We don't burn it. Like what we tell our kid, we don't sweep it under the carpet. We take it out of the ocean. I believe in shit like that. And so, if I'm ever successful with my business, it won't be an overnight thing. It'll be a 25-year deal. But for whatever reason, I am like a terrier on somebody's leg. I stay the course. I am a plotter. And, I had no direction. The first interview I went on as an actor, my dad came from Oklahoma from the Dust Bowl. They lost everything. Everything. And he was Tom Joe. He was a fist fighter. They were hard bark people. And came and worked on the dams and were discriminated against in California, taking jobs in the late 20s and 30s. And my dad said, he said, you know, Kev, if he only had one job because he was afraid to lose a job he had because he saw so many men out of work. And he said, don't ever let anybody outwork you. He said, if there's 50 guys to dig a ditch, you just keep digging it. If you can work all day, you can keep your job. And so for me, that's not a lot of great acting advice, is it? There's no acting in that advice. But I thought, I'm not going to let anybody outwork me, and I didn't know anything about acting. In my first interview I went for, I wore a suit. I was probably the biggest dweeb in the office, but I thought that's what you do. You dress up to get a job. And of course I learned, and then when it got a faded shirt, Levi's, and with holes in them, and I somehow tried to blend in. But my journey was an awkward one. And I'm so happy that things have turned out the way they have.
Yeah. I had read that you actually, I don't know if this is true, accidentally met Richard Burton in an airplane on a flight back from Mexico.
So much been made of that story. It just, everybody bumps in, but on my honeymoon, when I was still thinking about whether I'd do acting, I was coming back from Puerto Vallarta. I didn't have much money, but I got a brochure, and my wife and I looked at it, and for $324, we could stay in Puerto Vallarta for 4 days and get breakfast for free. There was 3 of those kind of brochures, and we took the cheapest one because that's all we had. And coming back from Mexico, we got on the plane, and the great Richard Burton got on there, and I had not even told my wife I was really thinking about acting. And got on the plane, and he had bought all 6 seats all around him. I thought, wow, he didn't really want to talk to anybody, but I thought he might want to talk to me. He was reading the book Gore Vidal's Lincoln, and I remember I got up and I walked him and I said, Mr. Burton, if there's a moment at all on this flight, I'd like to ask you a bit of advice. And he looked at me, and of course everybody in the plane was like this. I mean, 80 people wanted to see my head get chopped off by Richard Burton. And of course I watched him. He said, and he looked at me and said, when I'm done, you know, and I said, okay. And I walked back, and of course my wife went, what the fuck was that about? And I go, I don't know, And so I watched him like this, and he read that book, and I watched him, I'd watched him. And finally, I saw the book close, and I thought, and he took the boat, he closed it, he pulled his eyes, and he went to sleep. But after about 10-minute little cat nap, he stepped, and he looked back, and he said, I came up, I sat next to him. I'll never tell anybody what that discussion was, but he was so kind to me. I just stayed a little bit. And my saddest moment is I never had a chance to make the circle to tell him thank you for that conversation.
Wow. And it was after that that you decided to go completely full
Yeah,
full
when you don't
force.
know what you're doing, you take everything as a sign.
Yeah.
As a sign.
Actually, even when you think you know what you're doing, you take everything as a
So it was just, I don't know. Listen, there are dark days. You know, if you go into it for money or fame, maybe that's a good way to go for it. I just really wanted to work.
Yeah. Now, when you, a few weeks ago on TV, I saw you accept the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Broadcast Film Critics. And in your speech, you singled out Sean Connery and Gene Hackman, 2 great actors with whom you've worked. And I started thinking about, you know, where would I try to place you? Because I love, in my film history classes at Columbia, talking about the way that actors represent particular iconic aspects of life, whether in America or the world. And it wasn't either of them that I felt your greatest kinship with in a way. It was more like James Stewart or Gary Cooper, the very natural sort of American heroes, not so far away from, I think, Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. Could you tell us a little about who were the great inspirations for you in terms of the acting?
Well, you know, I like Cagney, I like Edward G. Robinson. How could these 2 guys, kind of diminutive size, Edward G. certainly not one of the most beautiful men, be a leading man? You know, I love Spencer Tracy and Gregory. I love Peter O'Toole. I could just go down the list. McQueen and of course Paul Newman. There's so many, and so I like these guys. I mentioned Sean Connery and Gene Hackman because I did get this lifetime achievement. Hell, I'm going to get another one on Tuesday from the AARP. And I don't know what happened. But I'm a romantic about our business. I love what came before me. I'm not so interested in myself. I love those guys, and those were two of our great leading men, and that's why I mentioned them. I wasn't sure. And then I went on to just say thank you. But they're awkward moments for me.
Well, by the way, I think that Gene Hackman is possibly one of the greatest actors ever produced in the United States, and Sean Connery is just this international icon. You chose well, but I'm curious about maybe, how do I put it?
Can I tell you a story about Gene Hackman?
Yes.
Would you like one? You're so great to be here, and I know these are long movies, especially with me. On No Way Out, there was a moment in time where we filmed in the office, and Gene Hackman played the Secretary of the Navy, something like that. And we had just been consistently doing scenes at this table. And I had found this script, so I felt like I had a little bit of authorship here. And I just finally said, I don't want to do another scene at the desk. And there was tension between the director and myself. And Gene Hackman was right there, and I was suddenly starting to talk about things. And I said, I think the scene should be over here for a lot of reasons, and I'm going to try to condense this story. But I said it should be here for something, and it was like, no, I don't want it. I said, I want to do it here. It went back and forth 3 or 4 times. I said, I think it should really be here. I said, I'll try it over here. And as I was trying it, I was trying to explain different things, like maybe a person could come in with donuts because I was being brought in at 3 in the morning, and I thought that this guy who'd been a complete prick to me in the movie would probably want to be nice to me. And so I'm explaining things while I'm still trying to do the dialogue, and so probably the scene didn't come off very well, and finally the director said, no, it's back at the desk. And I was like, ooh. So I walked back to the desk, and I tried to do the rehearsal again. And Gene was right there, and of course Gene's perfect in whatever he does. And I just stopped again. I said, it's over here. And that's the way it is. And I sat there, and I did the scene the way it is in the movie. And he goes, well, what about Gene? I said, well, Gene can do what Gene does. He is just great. Whatever he does, Gene can do what he does. At the end of the night, walking to my car after a long day, Gene was getting in his car, and I was getting in my car, and he said, hey, can I talk to you? And I walked over to him, and he said, don't you ever fucking do that in front of me again, in front of a director, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what he said. That's what I thought he was going to say. He said, you know, I got divorced a while ago. I've been doing some shitty movies the last 4 years. And it's what you have to do when you get divorced. He goes, I was watching you today, and you reminded me of what it was I really loved about acting. And then he got in the car and he drove away.
Wow. Wow. For those who may not have seen it lately, I think one of the greatest American films of the past 50 years and one of the greatest performances is The Conversation, in which Gene Hackman stars under Coppola's direction. If you haven't seen it lately, do yourselves a favor. It's one of the most brilliantly imploded performances that I think I've ever seen. Now, it was exactly 30 years ago that you made Silverado with Lawrence Kasdan. And by the way, it was their, it was their second collaboration because, as I think many of you know by now, your first film with him would have
Everybody plays Trivial Pursuits.
Right, the Big Chill. You were cut out of the Big
Yes.
Chill. He's the Alex who.
Why don't you tell everybody?
Well, I think everyone here has seen the Big Chill. My question is, how How do you see the landscape of American filmmaking today vis-a-vis 30 years ago when Kasdan was making films like The Big Chill, Silverado? I know that in that time, the independent American cinema completely has taken off. Almost it became part of Hollywood in a way. Do you think it's easier or harder now to make films of quality that don't fit the Hollywood formula?
I think there's a lot of quality movies being made, trying to, not a lot of them, and I'll tell you why there's not a lot, because they're hard. It's hard to make a good movie. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a movie. It's an art form. If it wasn't, everybody could do it. And that's one of the things that I think you got to, it's hard to make a good movie. I think it is harder now. I wish that I didn't have to reach into my own pocket to make Black or White. I felt that it was a movie that worked perfectly commercially. I don't think I'm a cutting edge guy. I don't think I'm avant-garde. I have difficulty in New York. I often, when I first came here, New York has always received me really well, but I've always been insecure about being here because I am kind of a cowboy. And I've always wanted to fit in here, but I've always felt that I know I don't come off as an intellectual because I'm not one. And I think of this as a very smart place. I don't know. I mean, this isn't therapy. I'm just kind of going here with you. But I think, you know, it's hard to. It is hard. It's harder. And when a movie works, they want to make 4 of them. And that's good for the actor because all you say is back the truck up. This is how big a shovel I want, and that's the money I'm going to get. That's good business. And it's good business when your movie doesn't work that you fall back into a sequel. That's smart. That's a good business.
You've never done a sequel, right?
I haven't done it, but I'm going to. Watch me. Of course, I'm in the twilight of my career. God, boy, I told you I'm slow. I'm a plotter. I'm catching on. But it's harder and it's discouraging. I think the most troublesome thing for me is testing. I don't care how you want my movie to end. I want to end it for you. I don't care. And so that part bothers me more than anything, that we have turned our creative process over to committee, over to audiences.
Right.
So I don't want to, I don't need to rail against the wind. I operate by myself for the most part. I would love to be a part of the herd, but it doesn't always work out that way for me.
Yeah. But you've got some films coming out now that I think may represent different sides of the filmmaking possibility. On February 20th, Disney is releasing McFarland USA, which I noted with great interest is directed by Nikki Caro, the woman who made Whale Rider a few years back. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, Disney has made this, it's a true story about migrant farm workers' kids who don't have a lot going for them. And a coach, myself, comes into their midst who doesn't know anything about anything. And they're so gifted that they end up winning 9 state championships. A little bitty school. I took it because I played McFarland in high school. I lived in Visalia. I moved around a lot. I played them in baseball. And I remember reading this story in Sports Illustrated. Disney came to me and said, would you be a part of it? And I said that I would. And I can go to Disneyland now for 5 years. I can go to all the Disneylands for 5 years. No, but it's a beautiful story, and I said I would be a part of it.
Great. And what is the other film I was reading about? It's called Criminal, directed by Ariel Vroman, who had done The Iceman. And I gather your co-stars are Gary Oldman, Tommy Lee Jones, Ryan Reynolds. I gather that's a very different kind of film.
Yeah, that's a big popcorn movie. The world's going to blow up unless I figure out a way to stop it. And here's the catch: I'm a criminal. So it's I like to, I fractured my knee stabbing somebody. It's one of those kind of movies, but it's good, and it's action and it's that stuff. So I make all kinds of movies, but once in a while, when I see a Black or White, I'm going to make it. And I know we gathered in the name of that movie, and I just, Mike Binder, the writer-director, is also here, and he sat up in that balcony, and I can't tell you how gratified he was in your response to the smallest of details.
Yeah.